who on some level are higher than, more developed or as developed as the people I met within my own cultural and religious background. So it doesn't, do you understand, what I was brought up to believe doesn't make sense anymore. And I find it very distressing that people of the same faith are fighting each other, and that people of belief of different faiths don't respect and appreciate one another. That was a very striking thing for me, for example. So, definitely we need a new truth, because our world is now a globalized world, and people from different cultures and traditions need to work and come to understand one another and work together, because they share so many things in common. Also, we need to harmonize religion and science, and very, very importantly, in all societies today, there's a lot of struggle going on around the issues of family and breakdown of family, particularly as societies become more wealthy and more educated. Strangely, they become more fractured, and the family becomes more difficult to hold together. So why is that? Why is that happening? And another very interesting area, and that's the area about what is this physical life in terms of the totality of our life. Is our physical life the totality of our life? Or when we die physically, do we continue to exist afterwards? Another very interesting realm in which to seek understanding. So, what the divine principle is saying is actually that this is a way of expressing it within a particular religious and cultural setting. And this is the religious and cultural setting of Judeo-Christianity. But you can find the same type of content in all the great faiths. Because in all the great faiths, of course, there's fundamental original truths, but usually over time, in the history of religion, there comes the religious founder and huge truths are revealed, and then over time, somehow it becomes institutionalized and gets lost in some way, and people depart from the original deep understanding and very clear practice and get a bit confused, and then there comes a reformer and then things lift up again to another level. And also because today we're facing a very different global situation. So, for example, we have challenges like the fact that we live with people of different cultures and different religions next door to one another, which we didn't before. But what this is illustrating is in the Judeo-Christian history, because over time human beings develop through practicing the truths they believe in. They develop their heart and they develop their intellect. They need to receive, in a sense, a higher level of truth than the one they understood before. So, for example, in Judeo-Christian history, Moses brought a set of principles, laws, a code of conduct. And that code of conduct was much more comprehensive than anything that existed previously. Of course, the roots and origins go back to the beginning, but also in particular maybe Abraham's family. But the level of explanation of how to conduct yourself and how to govern a society that came in Moses' time was much greater than anything existed before. But think about it, 2,000 years later in Judeo-Christian history, Jesus came and he brought another level of truth and understanding. So of course he related it back to this level, but it elevated people to another level. And of course I have huge respect for my Jewish friends and colleagues, and I can see also amongst my Jewish friends and colleagues lots of different levels. So, if you meet people of different faiths, not everybody of that faith is at the same level, right? People are at different levels, and they take it to much profounder levels. But simply speaking, in this line, you can say that because man's heart and intellect developed, then a higher standard of truth was needed. And the ultimate implication there in the third stage, this stage up here, it's saying that we need a truth to come, and that new expression of truth has to deal with all these sorts of questions, which maybe didn't have to be dealt with before. So in Jesus' time or Jewish time, maybe they didn't have to think so hard about religion, science in that way, or we didn't have to think so hard about the harmonization of religions and philosophies. Because we're facing different problems in our world today. So I hope you can understand that point as well. As we grow, as we develop, we need a new expression of the truth. So this is some biblical quotations, and again you can find similar things in other scriptures, which are expressing that although we understand something at the moment, a time is coming when we'll get greater understanding. So this is from John's Gospel. I have much more to say to you. This is Jesus. Much more to say to you, more than you can now bear. But when He, the Spirit of truth, comes, He will guide you into all truth. And again from the same Gospel in the New Testament. Though I've been speaking figuratively, it means, parables and figurative language, a time is coming when I will tell you plainly about God, about my Father. And again from one of St. Paul's letters, now we see but a poor reflection. Then, in the future, when the higher truth comes, we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, I only know part. Then I will know fully, even as I am fully known. So, if you look in other scriptural teachings, you'll see that in all the great traditions there's an expectation of some age that is to come when God will reveal higher truth and the world will be healed and things will be resolved through that. The unification principle, or the divine principle, is particularly concerned with revealing about this aspect of God which unification principle claims is the essence or the most important aspect of God. We'll talk about that more later. And that's the heart of God. So we need to define that and explain that. But basically the unification principle is saying everything that God is and everything that God does is because of this quality we call heart. And this quality we call heart, that's the element in the nature of God out of which love is flowing. So if you want to use an analogy to explain it, if love is water, then heart is the well. Do you understand? The well. When you can't get water, you dig a big hole, right? And you go down and down and down and down until you get to the water. And the well becomes the source of the water. Or another type is the spring. Do you know the spring? When under some rock somewhere, the water's coming out. That's the source of the water, and then the water flows and it becomes a stream and becomes a river, right? So, heart is the source, and love is the water that flows. So, heart is this fundamental impulse inside of you, which means that you feel very strongly you should be doing something to make other people happy, something to make other people joyful, something to give to others, right? This type of impulse, we call it heart. Right? And the principle claims that this is the essential nature of God. And the principle then explores about three fundamental aspects of God. And this is the joy of God the Creator. And what sort of heart motivated God as the Creator to create? This is very, very insightful and very much tells us about who we are to God and what God's creation means to God, and seeks to try to understand about the motivation of God in creating. And then the next heart of God that the principle reveals is when what God intended out of heart and out of love became something very different from His intention. God experienced the pain of the parent, if you like, who loses his children, or the pain of the artist or creator who sees his creation, which was a beautiful creation, damaged and broken. So we also examine that nature of God, and its very, very insightful nature of God. So when I've been giving presentation over the last few years to Ambassadors for Peace, and I'm trying to explain what Father Moon's fundamental motivation is, for getting involved all his life long, right until he's now 91 years old, in working for world peace. What's motivated him? I explained the primary thing that's motivated him is that he had a religious experience when he was a teenager in which he felt that God was extremely sorrowful and that Jesus was extremely sorrowful. And fundamentally for him that was to do with the fact that God as our creator is parent. Has a parental heart towards human beings, all human beings, no matter what color, no matter what race, no matter what religion. So the worst thing for parents is what? The worst thing for parents is when your children are at war with one another. They hate each other, they mistreat each other, they cheat each other, they lie to each other, they fight each other. This is the worst thing as parents. So his insight was, God is the creator, God is the parent of all humanity. So the most painful thing for God, which God is facing each and every day, is to see human beings mistreating him. Right? So he experienced the brokenheartedness of God. And then finally also, out of this one, of course, this is a consequence. If you invest all your heart and soul in something for the sake of love, when it goes wrong, you're really broken-hearted. But of course, with this sort of heart we're talking about, with this heart that is the source of true love, love doesn't give up. So probably in terms of human experience, one of the places we most commonly still discover, not in every case, but in many cases, this heart of God is in parents. So when you've got good parents, right, and you invest all your heart and soul in your children, and something comes out which is different from your expectation, what do? You throw them out of the house, you tell them you'll never speak to them anymore, you cut them out of your will, and you die never having resolved it. That's the ideal, isn't it? It isn't. What we're saying is the true heart of God and parents is, no matter how much your children disappoint you, your absolute commitment is to their happiness. Even though they may have caused you unhappiness, you remain committed to their happiness, right? No matter what. And that's this last one. It's that God has continued to invest in humanity despite his brokenheartedness. And this is a really powerful and important aspect which actually we can draw from a lot and learn from a lot. So I'm coming to the end of my time now, so if I may, just take a couple more minutes to try and very rapidly go through this. So where did this unification principle, divine principle, come from? Actually, it came from Father Moon's own research. And how did he research? Well, he searched in a sense within his own original mind, if you like, within his own deeper, true mind, as, of course, all the great religious founders have done. And also, of course, he had many spiritual experiences, meeting the religious founders, meeting the figures of biblical history and so on, with spiritual encounters. And in a sense, this teaching, this view of life is a combination of revelation and reason. And he's very clear that something has to make sense, has to appeal to our rational aspect. And of course also, you can't find out very profound things without making a lot of spiritual effort. It's a lot of prayer, a lot of study. And I think that's the case for all of us. You can't get deep understandings cheaply. You can't do it. Is there a book out there we can buy for €2 and just read it and then we'll be spiritual masters and saints and sages? It doesn't exist. There's no such way. Mother Teresa, of course, was a very careless, lazy lady who, just lived her life as she pleased, and she became very spiritually elevated. Total nonsense. You look at the life of anybody who's a great spirit, and they lead a life of extraordinary self-discipline, amazing dedication, huge amounts of prayer, huge amounts of study, huge amounts of service to others. Otherwise you can't get there. So here's just a picture of Father Moon when he had that first experience, which we'll talk about on the final day, when he had the very profound, life-changing meeting with God and with Christ. Later on in his earlier ministry, praying, just a few years back, 6 years back, when he went on a world tour at the age already in his late 80s, went on a global tour to found UPF. Okay, so that's in a sense where the unification principle comes from. I'm going to stop there, and thanks very much for your attention. I hope it's working out. If there's any feedback, please feel free to come to me in the breaks and ask a question or tell me something that wasn't clear to you. I'll be happy to try and help with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller, for that presentation. Okay, so just one.